You know that really hollow feeling you get when you pull out your phone? Spend maybe 45 minutes just endlessly scrolling through articles, data points, hot takes.
Oh, and life hacks.
Yes, the endless life hacks. And then you put the device down and you just feel completely, undeniably empty.
Right. It's like you just consumed this massive six-course meal of content, but somehow you are still completely starving.
Exactly. You're full of data, but, starved for actual insight.
Yeah, your cognitive stomach is stretched to its absolute limit, but zero actual nutrition has been absorbed.
Well, today we are diagnosing that exact feeling. Welcome to the Deep Dive, everyone. Our mission today is to figure out how to transform all those raw life experiences and the endless data we consume into genuine wisdom.
Which is much harder than it sounds.
It really is. And we're pulling our insights today from a really fascinating text by Sehan Adesoy. It's titled From Experience to Wisdom, The Pyramid of Light and the Return to the Cave.
It's a great piece, very timely.
Totally. And the source drops a term for this modern condition that I just found impossible to ignore. They call it information obesity.
Information obesity. I love that.
Right, because for someone like you, someone tuning into this, a curious learner, the biggest risk today isn't a lack of information. We are living through this period where we have this massive abundance of information, but it overlaps with a massive deficit of wisdom.
Yeah, you have the entirety of human knowledge right in your pocket. But the real question is, are you actually getting any wiser?
And honestly, usually the answer is no,
Yeah.
because we continually mistake consumption for digestion.
We really do. And to fix this, the text brings in a very practical rule from the ancient Stoic philosopher Epictetus.
Oh, I love the Stoics. What did he say?
Well, he pointed out this simple bit of anatomy, right? We have two ears and only one mouth, and they were designed that way so we listen twice as much as we speak.
That's such a classic Stoic reality check.
Right. But in the context of our modern information obesity, it translates to a very specific mechanism. Wisdom actually starts with subtraction.
Subtraction, meaning like cutting things out.
Exactly. You have to actively tune out the relentless external static of the world before you can even begin to hear what is true.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit, because to really cure information obesity, we need to draw a hard line between just knowing a fact and actually possessing wisdom.
Yeah, the text lays out a very clear hierarchy for this.
Right, it starts at data, then moves up to information, then upgrades to intelligence, and only then do you reach wisdom.
And you can't skip steps. Every single inquiry you make should be guided by this sequence of science, reason, and wisdom.
Meaning you gather the raw data scientifically first.
Right. Then you process it with your reason and your intelligence. And only after those mechanisms run their course do you actually reach wisdom. You just cannot leapfrog the bottom steps.
The source uses an analogy here that I think perfectly isolates the mechanics of this hierarchy, and it's pretty witty.
Oh, the tomato one.
Yes, so it goes like this. Information is knowing that a tomato is technically a fruit, but wisdom is knowing not to put a tomato in a fruit salad.
It's so good. It just illustrates the mechanical difference beautifully.
It really does, because, information simply recognizes and categorizes an object. It observes the seeds, checks the botanical definition, and just files the tomato under fruit.
And it stops there. That's all it does.
Right. But wisdom evaluates the relationships. It looks at the limits, the timing, and the ultimate consequences of an action.
Exactly. It projects the outcome of mixing that tomato with, peaches and grapes, realizes the dish will be ruined, and alters the action accordingly.
Let's apply that to your actual life, right?
Mm.
Whether you're looking at your career trajectory or a relationship, information is just an inventory of what you possess.
Like holding a degree.
Yeah, or having a specific software skill or a certain amount of capital in the bank. That's all static. Wisdom is the dynamic application.
It's the real-time calculation of where, how, and why you deploy those assets to build something sustainable.
Which naturally forces us to ask, well, how is that dynamic skill actually built? Because we don't just wake up and magically understand how to navigate complex human relationships.
Or career hurdles, yeah. We have to climb a cognitive ladder.
And the source leans heavily into Bloom's taxonomy to explain this architecture of human thought.
Which I found really interesting. It asks us to reframe how we view our own minds. Like, is your mind a quiet, dusty library where you just stack books neatly on shelves?
Or is it a noisy, messy workshop where raw materials are constantly being sawed in half and nailed together?
Exactly. The philosopher John Locke described the human mind as a tabula rasa, a blank slate.
Right, like an empty room.
Yeah, when we're born, that room is empty and dark. Then external experience enters and the room starts to take shape. But simply having an experience doesn't mean you learned from it.
Because it has to be processed, right,
Right.
through that cognitive pyramid.
Exactly. And the very bottom foundational steps of Bloom's taxonomy are remembering and understanding.
You know, I find those bottom steps deeply frustrating sometimes, just because of how our culture treats them.
How do you mean?
Well, we're conditioned to treat remembering as the ultimate goal. You pass the standardized test, you memorize the flashcards, you win the trivia night, and society just labels you as intelligent.
Oh, yeah. But the text calls this empty library syndrome.
Yes. Because if all you do is name things and memorize facts, you just have a giant room full of unread books. You're just hoarding potential energy.
Right, because remembering a concept and understanding its mechanics are two entirely different things. And honestly, even understanding the mechanics falls short of the next step up the pyramid.
Which is application.
Exactly.
And the analogy the text uses for this is just brutal. It says a person could have a massive mental library filled with the greatest architectural theories in the world.
They understand load-bearing walls and structural integrity perfectly, in theory.
Right. But if they're stuck in that understanding phase and they never move to application, they are like someone who has read 1,000 books on carpentry, but cannot hammer a single nail into the wall of their own house.
It's a harsh mirror to hold up to daily life, but it's incredibly revealing.
It really is. I mean, think about your own habits right now. Think about how many brilliant principles or profound quotes or productivity hacks are currently sitting on the shelves of your mind, completely unapplied.
We all do it. You listen to an analysis of Atomic Habits, or you read a thread on Stoic resilience.
You nod, you recognize the truth in it, and then your actual behavior the next morning changes by 0%.
Exactly, because there's a massive chasm between knowing a path and walking it. Anyone can read a manual and figure out how to start a project.
But the text emphasizes that the wise person proves their capacity by finishing it through action.
Right. Experience is simply the raw knowledge you paid a price to acquire. Wisdom is understanding the underlying reason you had to pay that price and then altering your future actions so you don't pay it again.
Okay, so let's follow that progression. You're taking action. You're hammering the nails, applying the knowledge, working highly efficiently.
But the text points out a trap here.
Right, the trap of mastery. Just because you're efficient only makes you a master craftsman. It doesn't actually make you wise.
No, it doesn't. To cross the threshold into wisdom, we have to move up the pyramid from how to why. We have to enter the phases of analysis and evaluation.
So what does this all mean for our decision-making?
Well, analysis is where the cognitive heavy lifting really begins. It's the deliberate art of atomizing a subject. You take a massive, overwhelming experience and break it down into its smallest structural components.
So you can actually see how it works under the hood.
Exactly. And the text brings in René Descartes and his concept of methodical doubt to explain this mechanism.
See, whenever I hear Descartes, I just think of the textbook phrase, I think, therefore I am. But methodical doubt seems much more aggressive than just sitting around thinking.
Oh, it is. It's an active intellectual weapon. Descartes used doubt to systematically strip away dogmas, prejudices, and externally imposed beliefs.
So when you analyze a situation using methodical doubt, you're refusing to accept the whole picture until you have independently verified every single part of it.
Exactly.
Let's translate that into a modern scenario. Say you hold a deep-seated belief like, I have to buy a house by the time I'm 30, or I am financially failing.
A very common one.
Right. So methodical doubt means you don't just accept that anxiety. You strip it down to the studs. Where did that data come from? Who told you that? Is it mathematically true in your current city?
You're emancipating your mind by refusing to blindly follow a blueprint handed to you by someone else.
That analytical breakdown gives you control over the pieces. And the source uses a beautiful architectural metaphor to separate this analysis phase from the evaluation phase.
Right, because analysis tells you exactly how to measure the mortar. It gives you the skill to cut the stone so it's perfectly square.
So analysis is the how, but evaluation is the why. Once you have this perfectly cut stone in your hands, the evaluation phase forces a confrontation.
It asks a crucial question.
Yes. The text asks a question that you should be applying to every project, relationship, and habit in your life. Does this specific stone actually fit the temple I am trying to build? Is it a cornerstone that will support my ultimate goal, or is it just a heavy decoration that is going to drain my energy?
Because what happens in the evaluation phase goes way beyond cold calculation. The text explicitly defines this as a conscience check.
A conscience check, I like that.
Yeah, it's an internal accounting system that blends your sharp intellect with your deep emotional intuition. You're no longer just processing data.
You're taking on the heavy responsibility of decision-making. You're weighing the true value of that single stone against the entire architecture of your life.
Exactly. Intellect gets the stone cut, but conscience determines if it belongs in the wall.
That's a great way to put it.
And when you evaluate those stones successfully, you reach the absolute pinnacle of Bloom's taxonomy, which is creation. At the top of the pyramid, you stop passively consuming the information of others and begin building an entirely new, synthesized perspective of your own.
Building this internal temple sounds incredibly rewarding. You climb the cognitive steps, you evaluate your choices, you build the life. But, I mean, that assumes a linear upward trajectory.
Which life never is.
Right. What happens when a completely evaluated, well-built life still falls apart? Because it does. We face sudden layoffs, unexpected health crises, or relationships that collapse no matter how much effort we put in. How does the pyramid account for unavoidable failure?
Well, the text suggests that wisdom is rarely forged in a peaceful, quiet library while everything is going right. It's predominantly forged in the pit of tragedy or loss.
To explain this, the source brings in the Greek myth of Sisyphus.
Looking through the lens of the philosopher Albert Camus, specifically.
Right. And if you aren't familiar, Sisyphus is cursed by the gods to push a massive boulder up a steep mountain. Right as he reaches the peak, the boulder inevitably slips, rolls all the way back down to the bottom, and he is forced to start over.
It's the ultimate metaphor for crushing, meaningless effort.
Yeah. It perfectly mirrors the modern experience of pouring a year of your life into a startup that goes bankrupt, or desperately trying to save a failing marriage only to end up in divorce court anyway.
But the insight the author pulls from Camus completely flips the myth. Sisyphus does not gain wisdom while he's straining to push the rock up the hill.
No, because during the ascent, he's entirely consumed by the physical exertion. The profound shift happens on the walk down.
Right. After the boulder falls, Sisyphus has to turn around and walk empty-handed back to the bottom of the valley.
And it's in that descent, in the quiet aftermath of total failure, that he processes the tragedy. He analyzes where his footing slipped, he evaluates the futility of the god's curse, and he actively chooses to find the courage to put his hands back on the stone.
Wisdom isn't found in the celebration at the peak.
Exactly. It's manufactured in the conscious decision to restart after the fall.
The text actually weaves in two major philosophers to help process these downward moments. Baruch Spinoza and Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz. They offer very specific lenses for handling that kind of devastating failure.
What's Spinoza's take?
Well, Spinoza argues that when tragedy strikes, human beings naturally view it through the narrow keyhole of their own ego. We ask, why is this happening to me right now?
Naturally.
But Spinoza says we must learn to look at events sub specie aeternitatis, which means from the perspective of eternity.
Okay, but how does that actually work in practice? If I just lost a business I spent a decade building, trying to look at it from the perspective of eternity sounds incredibly difficult.
It does. It requires shifting your timeline. When you look through the keyhole of the present moment, a business failure looks like absolute ruin. It triggers a chemical panic response. But if you open the door and view it on the timeline of an entire human lifespan or even human history, the ego dissolves. It ceases to be a targeted attack by a malicious universe and becomes just a forced pivot that aligns with a broader trajectory.
And Leibniz takes a slightly different approach, right?
Yes. Leibniz has this concept of pre-established harmony. He viewed the universe as a grand, complex symphony where every single event, every joy, every failure, every heartbreak is a specific note in that composition.
I have to admit, I struggle with this step. If my life is falling apart, someone telling me to just trust the grand symphony feels dangerously close to toxic positivity.
Oh, absolutely.
Does the text actually explain how to apply this without just suppressing legitimate anger or grief?
It does, and it's a vital distinction. Leibniz is not telling you to pretend a sad note sounds happy. A tragic loss is a devastating note. But the mechanism of wisdom here is about context, not suppression.
Okay, I'm tracking.
A wise person doesn't spend their energy screaming at the sheet music because a minor chord exists. They accept the reality of the note and they trust the grand symphony. They use their cognitive pyramid to figure out how to arrange the surrounding notes so that the tragedy becomes a meaningful part of the larger song.
So you don't just survive the agonizing experience, you integrate it. You have to let go of how you originally thought the song was supposed to sound.
Exactly.
The source actually uses a brilliant biological analogy here. The nautilus. It's a sea creature that lives in a spiraled shell. And as the nautilus grows, it doesn't try to permanently stretch its current living chamber, and it certainly doesn't carry its old discarded shells on its back.
Right. It physically builds a wider, brighter chamber, moves forward, and permanently seals off the old one behind it.
And the text contrasts this natural, elegant growth with people who desperately cling to their past titles.
We all know someone trapped in an old chamber.
Totally. Like the retired CEO who corners people at parties to talk about deals they closed 20 years ago. Or the former athlete whose entire identity is anchored to a high school championship.
They refuse to walk down the hill like Sisyphus. They just stand there pretending they're still at the peak.
Exactly. The text argues that the truly wise individual operates like a dignified builder who steps down from their old titles without friction.
They recognize when a phase of life is complete. They seal off the old chamber, let go of the temporary label, and simply radiate the accumulated light of their experience into the new space.
Okay, let's follow that light to the final stage. You've done the work. You climbed the pyramid, you've evaluated your foundation, you survived the agonizing walk down the mountain, and you achieve this enlightened perspective.
You've got the light.
Right, and the obvious instinct is to just sit comfortably in your new, spacious Nautilus shell and enjoy your hard-earned peace. But here's where it gets really interesting.
Oh.
The text firmly states that you cannot keep the light for yourself. The author brings in Plato's famous allegory of the cave to explain this final obligation.
In Plato's allegory, human beings are chained inside a dark cave their entire lives, staring at a blank wall. Shadows are projected onto the wall, and because it's all they've ever seen, the prisoners believe the shadows are the absolute truth of reality.
Right.
Eventually, one person breaks their chains, navigates out of the cave, and sees the actual sun. They experience the true light of reality.
And the text makes a razor-sharp distinction here. It says, wisdom turned inward is merely maturity. Wisdom turned outward is guidance.
Yes.
The enlightened person has a fundamental social responsibility to walk back down into the dark, uncomfortable cave to help others break their chains.
Which is notoriously difficult because the people in the dark do not want to be saved. The light hurts their eyes, they're entirely comfortable with the shadows they know, and they will resist the person trying to disrupt their reality.
This is where the true mechanics of wisdom are tested. Because it's useless to stand in the cave and yell high-level philosophy at people who only understand shadows.
Exactly. You aren't a savior, you are a guide. The truly wise person possesses the ultimate translation skill.
Right. They can take the massive, complex synthesis they built at the very top of Bloom's taxonomy and reverse engineer it all the way back down to the remembering and understanding levels.
You have to speak the native language of the cave. You make your profound insight entirely usable for someone who is still struggling at the bottom of the pyramid.
Now, if you're listening to this and thinking that pyramids, boulders, and ancient caves feel a bit disconnected from your morning commute, the text drops a massive modern variable into the equation.
Artificial intelligence.
Yes. AI is currently flooding the cave.
AI is the ultimate disruptor of the cognitive hierarchy we just walked through. I mean, look at the bottom steps: remembering, understanding, analyzing. AI is built to execute those steps at a speed and scale that makes human processing look glacial.
It'll ingest the data, categorize the tomato, and mathematically analyze the absolute most efficient way to cut the stone for your temple.
Exactly. It's an intelligence multiplier.
So, if a machine can handle the heavy lifting of intelligence, what is left for the human mind? The text quotes Mustafa Suleyman, the CEO of Microsoft AI, to answer this.
And it makes your wisdom more critical than ever.
Exactly. Suleyman points out that while AI gives us unprecedented intellectual leverage, we cannot fully trust it yet. And the reason is mechanical. AI can perform flawless analysis, but it is fundamentally incapable of the evaluation phase.
It lacks the capacity for the conscience check.
Bingo. AI can analyze a social media platform and tell you the exact algorithmic formula to maximize user outrage and engagement. It gives you the how.
But it has no emotional or moral context to ask why. It cannot decide if deploying that algorithm is actually a healthy cornerstone for society or a toxic decoration.
Right. AI democratizes the light. It hands the powerful tools to everyone in the cave, but human wisdom is the only mechanism that can provide the moral grounding to use those tools safely.
As technology accelerates our ability to process information, the human requirement to slow down, run the conscience check, and evaluate the consequences actually becomes the most critical skill on Earth.
Which brings us to the core thesis of this entire journey. Information, raw data, and AI-generated analysis. Those are just properties. They're commodities you can hoard on a server.
Right.
But wisdom is a trust. It's an ultimate deposit placed in your care, and its true value is only unlocked when you spend it to illuminate someone else's darkness.
We've covered immense ground today, moving from the empty calories of information obesity, up the cognitive pyramid, down the mountain of failure, and back into the cave. But I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over.
I like a final thought. What is it?
It combines what the text revealed about Sisyphus and artificial intelligence. So we establish the mechanism of wisdom for Sisyphus, right? He doesn't become wise by pushing the boulder up. He achieves wisdom during the agonizing, reflective walk down the hill after a total failure. We also established that AI is rapidly preparing to take over the heavy lifting of our cognitive pyramid, analyzing and processing all our daily data perfectly. It's effectively carrying our boulders up the mountain for us with zero errors.
It optimizes the ascent.
Exactly. So, if AI soon ensures that our boulders never slip,
Right.
if technology perfectly insulates our lives and permanently stops us from failing, how will we ever learn to become wise if we never have to take the walk down the hill?
Wow. If the rock never drops, the reflection never happens. We completely lose the descent.
Yeah.
That is a deeply unsettling but brilliant puzzle to leave off on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. Put down the phone, digest what you've consumed today, and we will catch you next time.